No one questions the terrible plight of children who fled from war or grinding poverty to try to make their way alone in Europe. What is debated is whose responsibility they are. The Prime Minister has argued that it is Britain's duty to take care of those who've not yet made it to so-called safe countries, but he's under mounting pressure to take some of those already in Europe. And if he doesn't do so, he could face defeat, not just in the Lords, as he has already, but in the House of Commons as well. Leading those calling for a rethink are those who were given refuge here when they fled from the Nazis, the so-called Kindertransport children. Sir Eric Reich joins us in the studio. He's the president of the Association of Jewish Refugees and has written to the Prime Minister. Joining us too, Heidi Allen, the Conservative MP, who's one of those meeting the Immigration Minister James Brokenshire today, along with other potential rebels. So Eric, of course, you came here, aged 4 in 1939?
That is correct.
And you see parallels, do you, between your plight and the plight of these children?
Nothing is identical in this world, but there are similarities, very serious similarities. And the truth is that all these children that came, we were nearly 10,000, we contributed back to the country.
And you've spoken in your letter to the Prime Minister of the echoes of the past haunting you and fellow Kinder.
They do. They haunt us very, very much. Most of us never saw our parents again. So in that sense, I'm lucky. I was very, very young, and therefore I remember very little. But a lot of the Kinder, who were about 10 or 11, remember their parents.
When you hear the Prime Minister and others say, no, hold on, it isn't quite the same as that. The people who are here, these young people, are not necessarily fleeing genocide. Some of them are not come from Syria. They've come from Afghanistan, from Eritrea, places where terrible things are happening, but they have already reached relative safety in Europe. What do you say to that?
Well, I say that, look, they're fleeing because there's a problem. And the problem is that their lives are at stake. And consequently, I believe that we should at least help the unaccompanied children who are in desperate need.
And won't that have what is euphemistically called a pull factor? In other words, simply say to other parents, other young people, send more children over. Take the risk, because if you do, they'll end up in Britain.
It may. You just don't know. But at the moment, there is a plight of thousands of children, some who've got lost. People can't be found, and to take approximately 3,000 children into this country and help them will help us as well.
Heidi Allen, sitting alongside you here, the Prime Minister couldn't have been clearer in the House of Commons, could he? Publicly as well as privately, I think, in meetings with people like yourself. We are not going to do something that will increase this so-called pull factor, but we will, he says, carry on as a government, taking people who are in refugee camps close to Syria.
And that's right, and the additional 3,000 that was announced, I think around about a fortnight ago now, was of course brilliant news, because any desperate children and family that you're taking from such an incredibly terrible background, of course, is welcome. But, the Prime Minister mentioned in PMQs last week, and you just referred to it again now, relative safety in Europe. It is not relatively safe to be pulled into trafficking and prostitution. Talk to the doctors there, Médecins Sans Frontières. They are literally stitching up children on a daily basis and sending them back to the camps. That is not the safety that you and I think of when we think of Europe. So these children are not safe at all and they need our help.
So when you meet the Minister later today, you will say you've got to back down. He may say, we're told, look, there is a scheme that allows us to take people who've got some relative, a distant relative sometimes, not just a brother or sister, possibly an uncle or an aunt who already lives in Britain. Maybe we could speed that up. Would that satisfy you?
It would be a great start, because there are an awful lot of children who are literally unable to get into the system. Once you're in the system and you can claim asylum, as you say, you have a relative over here, then the process begins. That is a legal obligation we have already. Dublin 3, people may be familiar with that phrase, but it's not happened quickly enough. And actually, if we can establish where those children are and who they are, then the magical number of 3,000 almost becomes academic. It's about finding those that have the right to be here.
But we know, don't we, that in terms of children who are in the Calais camp, just 23 of them met that criteria, in other words, of having a relative here in the UK.
Not at all. At the last count, there was a census that's been done by a couple of self-appointed charities, Citizens UK and Help Refugees. At the last count, despite the fact that around about 130 children went missing when the jungle was half demolished, Lord only knows what's happened to them, of those that remain, there are 150, in the region of 150.
So there's many more. So this may be the sort of compromise you could live with. Simple question. It comes down to your vote in the end. You were highly critical before, but you decided the last time there was a vote to abstain, not to vote against. In truth, if you are not prepared to vote against, the government are not going to back down, are they?
But I am this time, and many are. The only reason I abstained for two reasons. One, it felt disrespectful to those 3,000, and I wanted to continue the dialogue with ministers.
But your clear message is you and enough people to defeat the government MPs will rebel if they don't back down.
100%.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, Heidi Allen. Thank you, Sir Eric Reich.